Hello everyone, my name is Liron Ben Ezra. I'm a PhD student at the School of Social Work in Tel Aviv University. I must say I'd rather be with you in person, not having to think about COVID or Omicron or whatever, but we'll try to make the best of it. So here, I'll share my presentation. Okay. So in today's short lecture with a long name you see in front of you, Home Alone, Acting Out the Black Hole, Ways of Expressing Void in Qualitative Interviews, I would like to take you on a journey. And as every good journey, this might be at times a bumpy ride, so bear with me. The idea for this lecture was born from my own experiences in the interviews, as I understood that part of the data is not in the words, but in other forms of expression. And for me, as someone who comes with great love of words, this was a really interesting and mind-changing understanding. As I understood the data, as I said, is sometimes outside of words. So I will try to reach what is beyond words or behind words, and I'll try to make a room for something different. Considering how listening to nonverbal cues in the interviews can contribute to the understanding of the subject matter, especially with dealing with pre-verbal experience. And this takes me to my research. So the question is, how can I speak about the black hole? How do I use language to describe something that is outside the landscape of words? So first I'd like to introduce you to my study. The research name is Dead Weight, and it's the experience of being a daughter to an orphan mother. So by using qualitative approach, I had attempted to understand the experience of being a daughter to an orphan mother. I had interviewed 10 women in in-depth interview who were born after their mother had lost both of her parents. And I had just one criteria. It means regardless of the age of the mother, the cause of the death, or any other criteria, except for the mother having no parents when the daughter was born. I deliberately wanted to have a wide spectrum as possible because I wanted to understand something about the way death and loss leaves an impact through generations, and how experience that happened before birth can leave a mark. I analyzed the data using a Gadamarian hermeneutic phenomenology, which briefly, and whoever knows Gadamer knows that there's a lot to say about it, but really not in many words. It means that understanding is always subjective and interpretive. And we as researchers must engage in a spiral process of fusion of horizon. These are Gadamer words, in which our horizon meets the interviewee horizon in creating something new. So as I went deeper and deeper into the study, talking about the dead that were never there, right? Because the daughter was born after her mother lost both of her parents, I understood I needed to expand my own horizon into a new form of listening, a new form of understanding, and a new form of being with. Quoting Derrida, who said, "One must stop believing that the dead are just the departed, and the departed do nothing. One must stop pretending to know what is meant by to die, and especially by dying. One has then to talk about spectrality. Spectrality from the word spectre, ghost. And with the Derrida's thoughts about that, I would like to move on and tell you about 2 interviews and how the phantom-like or ghost-like, spectre-like experience of being a daughter to an orphan mother manifested itself. I will do so by presenting my own experience in the interviews and combining it with quotes from popular songs that in my understanding echoes something from the interviews. So first there's Ella. Ella was 50 years old when I conducted the interview. I arrived into Ella's apartment 2 minutes before the time we had set between us. A young man opened the door, which I later found out was her son, and he said, "Ella is not at home," with a pleasant face. He said that. I went downstairs wondering if I got the time wrong and a slight feeling of fear creeping in regarding the existence of the interview. Ella arrived a few minutes later and we went inside together. This time the stairwell seemed more familiar to me. When we entered the apartment, the son told his mother that there was a leak in the neighbor's apartment downstairs. If this was a fictional story, then here the reader must identify the use of a metaphor. The boundaries between top to bottom has blurred. The container is perforated. Something is leaking, but what? That's a quote from Smashing Pumpkins song. I catch the rainfall through the leaking roof that you had left behind. You remind me of that leak in my soul. Ella went downstairs to take care of the matter, the leaking, in the neighbor's apartment. And about a minute later, the son told me that he too should go. So we're leaving you home alone. These were his exact words. Thus, within a few minutes of entering the apartment, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table in an unfamiliar home, which I had never visited before, and yet it felt intimate. For a moment, it seemed to me that from now on, this is my life. That I can get used to the cozy apartment and the faces of the people staring at me from the magnets on the fridge, that no one will come back, that I have been abandoned to some intriguing freedom, that I was an orphan. Paradoxically, the whole situation made me anxious and at the same time felt pleasant and familiar. With the return and the relief that I had not been forgotten, I recalled Winnicott's well-known saying, "It is a joy to be hidden and a disaster not to be found." Ravit. Ravit was 40 years old at the time we conducted the interview. And the interview meeting with Ravit was to contact me following a post on social media had to be rescheduled several times. It is as if something has a hard time syncing up in the first place. After scheduling the interview, I arrived at her house at the tail end of an illness, still a little exhausted and not at my best. Ravit was not at home. She had forgotten we scheduled the interview. On the phone, she immediately apologized and said it was not at all typical of her. I felt a sense of relief as her absence freed me from trying to be at my best by conducting the interview. I could go home. We scheduled another interview and then we eventually met. And during that interview, I remember us talking and me feeling we were like about an hour or so into the interview. I gave a quick glance at the clock behind Ravit, only to see that no more than a few minutes has passed. I was shocked. I have some experience with interviews, but I never had such an experience where my perception of time was so distorted. It was as if time had frozen, as if we were both in some other dimension of time, witnessing the death of time, or maybe the time of the dead. To quote Shakespeare's Hamlet, "The time is out of joint." And another quote from a Case Choice song, the Belgian band, who says, "Tomorrow I was nothing, yesterday I'll be. Time has fooled me into thinking it's a part of me." So as I go back to the beginning of my lecture and the question that led me, I know that this experience, the leak, staying home alone, the non-passing of time, all teach me something about the inner experience of being a daughter to an orphan mother. But what? Abram and Turok, both of them are Hungarian psychoanalysts, wrote about the ghosts that are transmitted from one generation to the other, leaving traces of absence. In their words, they call it transgenerational phantom. And their writing echoes in psychoanalyst Ofra Eshel, which is an Israeli psychoanalyst, and she uses the phrase from the world of astrophysics, black holes, as she describes the gaps and voids that are internalized in the soul due to exposure to dead parts that anchor inside the parents. And with those thoughts about the transgenerational phantom and the black holes that are transmitted from one generation to another, I want to use a sentence that I read in an interview about those phenomena. And the interview said, "One remembers only that one remembers nothing." And I think to conclude our short journey, I would like to suggest that when the only memory is the memory of the absent, words fail to comprehend. And our work as qualitative researchers is based mainly on words. However, this focus can sometimes detract from the ways that information is expressed. I want to say that in the encounter with black holes, we must listen not only to what speaks, but to what is acted out. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you had an interesting ride with me, and I hope to see you in person. Thank you. Bye.